Good morning, everyone. I welcome you all to yet another session of Sunday Speaking Series powered by Shubh Language Academy. We are fortunate to have with us today Miss Rebecca Peters. Ma'am is a scholar in the Religion Department at Florida State University in America. Her work focuses on women directors in Bollywood and the resulting interpretation on their films. She uses an interdisciplinary approach and has published in the areas of film studies, gender studies, and religion in South Asia. In 2019, Ms. Peters was awarded the Fulbright-Hays Doctoral Dissertation Research Award to conduct fieldwork in India. She has also helped organize the South Asian Media and Cultural Studies conference at FSU since 2017. Ms. Peters' work highlights the importance of studying the producers of media, especially popular culture products, in order to better understand how social systems are changed over time. So that's very interesting. Thank you so much, Rebecca ma'am, for having found time for us and being there. We welcome you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for asking me to join. I'm happy to come and talk about India and English and Hindi and Bollywood, things I enjoy all of.
Thank you, ma'am. Absolutely. And just to let all our participants know that ma'am is joining from Florida and it's 1:30 in the morning. So thank you for, taking time at this odd hour as well and being a part of this session. Thank you so much. So just to let you know that this is a platform wherein we invite all our learners in English to enhance their skills, and we don't sort of just move ahead in a way that's just to listen, but at the end we open the session so that they could exchange and have an interaction with the experts. So perhaps with you, they will be talking in the end after having heard you. So to begin, I would like to ask you, ma'am, to talk a little bit about yourself, and then we will get going about it.
Yeah, so first I want to say that I understand my American accent may be a little more difficult to understand. So if you need me to repeat anything, let me know. And if I start talking too fast, tell me to slow down as well. Especially when I talk about topics I enjoy, I tend to get quite speedy. Yeah, I'm a PhD student. I am finishing my dissertation. I hope to graduate this year. And I started studying India halfway through my master's program in 2010, and just started learning as much as I could about India. I traveled to India in 2011 to learn Hindi. And that was the first of, I think I've visited and lived in India about 10 times now, since 2011, for various links. I was last there in 2022 to do my field research. The Fulbright that I was awarded got delayed because of COVID. And I was finally able to do my field research in 22. So I've been back in Tallahassee writing my dissertation since then.
Right. Thank you. You talked about your experience of learning Hindi. So we would like to know as to how this whole interaction of learning Hindi start. How did that start, and how has it been all this while till this point of time? And have you been practicing Hindi back in the US, or how do you do it? And how did you get in touch with Hindi, especially I'm sure with your research work that you initiated? That was maybe one of the reasons for that. But even if it was before that, if you could throw some light on that.
Yeah, so um, I've always been interested in film, and then in my master's degree, I decided to focus on Bollywood film, Hindi commercial film specifically. I really loved it and decided that I wanted to study it. Unfortunately, FSU has no Hindi program, so the only language I could take in my master's degree was Sanskrit. So I started with Sanskrit. Um, I did a year of Sanskrit, and then once I graduated with my master's, it was actually cheaper and in all ways better for me to go to India for 6 months and learn Hindi. So I was in Uttarakhand in Missouri at the Landor Language School. And I was there for 6 months learning Hindi. And I traveled around India a bit after that. And then I returned to America, worked for a couple of years, started my PhD, and then did a summer of Hindi in Jaipur, and then I did the year-long language program where I stayed with a family for both of those, which is how I know how I got associated here with the school. And then the difficulty is when I am in America, it is much harder for me to practice my Hindi. There are some people from South Asia here, but a lot of them are either South Indian and don't really do Hindi very much, or they're just not really that interested in having a language partner. I do have a really good friend from Pakistan, and she would speak with me. Her and her husband would talk with me a little bit. So that was nice. It's not exactly the same, but it's close. So a lot of my Hindi practice in America is watching Bollywood films, honestly.
True.
So yeah, I've been several times, and as I said, the last time was about a year and a half ago. So.
Right. So we would definitely look forward to listen some Hindi from you. But before that, I would like to ask you a little question since you talked about Bollywood. So how did that attachment towards Bollywood start? Did you start getting into Bollywood in terms of as a viewer only when you started learning Hindi, when you got in touch with India, or was it even before that you had an idea about Bollywood?
Yeah, so it was pretty interesting because I never really studied anything about India. And in my master's program, the graduate advisor who did South Asian, like she did goddess worship in the north, and she really loved Bollywood. So she knew how much I loved films, and she said, "Oh, you should take my Bollywood class." And I thought, "Oh, a Bollywood class for master degree credit? Absolutely, sign me up." I'd never seen a Bollywood film before, and so our semester started in January, and by like the beginning of March, I was staying up all night just watching Bollywood films. And at that point, I took my own advice, which is the thing you were doing is the thing you love. And so I changed my direction and decided to study Bollywood. Prior to that, I actually was doing classical languages, Greek and Latin. That was what my undergraduate degree was in, and that is what I had anticipated my PhD would be in. But I really I loved Bollywood films so much, and sort of was able to see a path where I could study film as a degree and as a profession, to be a professor, which is what I wanted to do. And so, yeah, I changed everything where all the courses that I took in my last year of my master's were in some way related to India. So I took Sanskrit, as I said. I did take like a film music course, but then I took like an Islamic art and architecture course because that was the closest I could come to getting anything even remotely South Asian. It's not really, but it does inform a little of South Asian architecture. And I took what was it? I think I think that's when I took the Ramayana class. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, so my study of Hindi stems from my desire to study Bollywood.
Right.
And I mean, since I've been going to India, I've had lots of people ask me, why only Bollywood? There's so many other great industries. And my answer is always the same. I only have time to learn one language.
True, true. But I think,
So
yeah, please carry on,
yeah,
ma'am.
and definitely when I started, there were the number of regional films that were subtitled in English were very low. Today, because of places like Netflix, we have and Amazon, many more films now have access to people that don't speak the language. So I will definitely be including them into my repertoire in the future. But initially, I was like, just one language, so we're sticking to Bollywood.
True, true. I think you have very beautifully mentioned the fact that when you start doing something, you fall in love with it and you take it up at different levels as well. So I think slowly and gradually that is what happened to you. And that's really fascinating to see that your love and your attachment towards Bollywood and then, of course, to India and the kind of interest you bring towards Bollywood with women directors who are doing a wonderful, remarkable job in their field as well. So we are intrigued to listen a little bit Hindi from you, Rebecca, ma'am. If you could speak a little bit in Hindi for us, that would motivate our Indian learners to learn English because they have been into this field for a long time now. But still, if they want to enhance their skills, maybe that can help them.
um, माफ कीजिए मेरी हिंदी बहुत खराब है let's see ज़्यादा शब्द भूल गई
Uh-huh.
especially when you don't use it
True, true. No, that's true. No, but still, आपने बहुत अच्छी हिंदी बोली, and we are very happy of it. Thank you. And what have been the challenges for you, Rebecca, ma'am, in learning Hindi? For example, if you could cite some of them, and how did you overcome them?
So I think the biggest challenges for me, because I did come from a background of languages and I had learned Greek and Latin, I had Spanish in high school. One of the biggest challenges for me was that they're not the same kind of what are called cognate words. So words that sound similar. In so in Greek and Latin and English, because English, one of the stem root languages is Greek and Latin, there will be words that sound similar in meaning. And so it's easier to like sort of remember the vocabulary. And when I first started learning Hindi, I really struggled because I didn't see nearly the cognates. So it was a lot more sort of rote memorization. The one that always sticks in my head is pani, because nothing in my past or mindset would ever make, this be pani, right? Um, or dude for milk, or like all the kinds of things that other than actual like real Hindi loan words, I had to just like sit down and memorize them. And that was I think it was much harder because I'd gotten used to, having at least a few of the words, sound familiar. And so for me, for a lot of English speakers, the word order change is very difficult. But it wasn't for me because Greek and Latin both do this are very similar to Hindi in that you usually have, that you start with the noun and you end with the verb. Like it's much more tied to endings and things like that. So that in the writing part was not so hard. I will say in speaking, I tend to sort of like, as I'm trying to remember what my end is going to be. It is something that you do have to sort of get used to, shifting how you order things. But yeah, I mean, I think those were the two biggest things for me. I will say I did find that in the real world, I had a little bit of a leg up on my other students because I came in watching so many Bollywood films. So first of all, a lot of like cultural phrases I was used to. But I think even more importantly, it was super easy for me to hear the English in a Hindi sentence. And my fellow, students, because all we're doing is Hindi in the classroom, you get very used to just hearing Hindi, Hindi, Hindi. And then you go out and people speak Hindi intermixed with a few English words. And that would really trip them up. I remember one of my favorite examples was I went to see I think it was Rockstar. I think it was Rockstar. But I was a film with a friend of mine, and after we left, she said, I was so confused about what happened to the love interest. And I said, oh, well, she got leukemia, so it was bad for her to get pregnant. And so when she did, she ended up, dying from the complications. And her and all of my friends were like, how did you know that? And I said, well, like, I don't know it was leukemia, but he said blood transfusion, so I assume it's leukemia. And they go, no, how did you know that Hindi? And I was like, oh, no, he said it in English. Like,
That's interesting. I think the kind of soaking that you did for yourself all this while really helped you to understand how English is put into Bollywood and even the regular use here in India.
right. Yeah. And so when you're not used to hearing it, even when it's your native tongue, and
True.
if you're not used to hearing it, you miss it. And so I would say I very much encourage people that are learning the language to watch as much as you can, even with subtitles in your language. I was only watching Bollywood movies with English subtitles, but you pick up. If you watch enough, you pick up on it.
True. Absolutely. I think that's a great tip for all the language learners, whether it be French or Spanish or German for that matter. I think soaking oneself in the culture through that specific cinema of that country does make a lot of difference.
Yeah.
Coming on to the cultural shocks, Rebecca, how did you find them when you came to India for the first time, and how have you sort of gotten used to these changes now, and they don't shock you anymore? So, was there anything that shocked you at the very beginning, and how have you seen it evolve over the years now for you?
I mean, it's weird because I definitely didn't feel shocked by the differences. Partly because I had been studying India and watching films and things. So I knew intellectually about things like, it's a very populated country compared to America. But actually feeling that is quite different. There's so many more people, which means things work differently. In America, we are very concerned with our personal space and with going in order and, taking your time. But it's very different in India. I also had to get used to sort of not just accepting what people said prices were. That's something that a lot of Americans struggle with. Luckily for me, my first time in India, I spent the majority of my time in Landor, which in Missouri, because they're so used to foreigners, a lot of their shops are fixed price shops, which gave me a good idea about what I should be asking for. Because that's one of the things that's hardest is, you're like, I don't know, like, I understand I'm being overcharged, but I don't know by how much. I don't know what's an unreasonable amount to ask for. And the unfortunately for me, I don't handle spicy food too well. I really enjoy it, but I don't handle it well. So it's a constant, I will tell people, white people mild, Ferengi mild, so, but, I found that for all of the times that I would get frustrated, I would also have just as many moments of people being especially kind and helpful and just really opening themselves up, which I found, on my first trip, I made friends that I still am in contact with today. And so it is a lot easier now when I arrive. So this last time that I was there, a friend of mine who'd never been to India came to do her research, and so I met her in Delhi, and I stayed with her.
Yeah, I think Mr. Chanchal Chakrabarti, yeah, could you be on mute, please?
ভেতরে একটা কিছু কাজ করছে হাফ বা কোয়ার্টার পার্সেন্ট, বুঝতে পেরেছো? যে কোনো কালারই বোধহয় তাই হয়।
All right, sorry. Yeah, please carry on, ma'am.
Okay. I forgot what I was saying.
Yeah, so you met your friend in Delhi.
Oh yes, and she was so overwhelmed with the noise.
Right.
The honking, everything, and I hadn't even noticed it. I was like, oh yeah, I guess it is really, yeah. Like,
True. I think you have totally gotten into the culture in such a profound way that you cannot separate yourself anymore from the Indian society now. Maybe
right,
so that's
yeah.
the adaptability that you have developed for yourself.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Also, now we have spoken about the language part of it, which was very interesting, and you also share some of the tips that our Indian learners who want to move ahead with English or any other foreign language can take up to enhance their skills. We would like to now focus on your research area, because you are working on women directors in Bollywood. So first and foremost, we would like to know as to why this topic, and what has been your research in this area till this point of time.
Yeah, so it kind of came, so I knew I wanted to work on Bollywood, and I wasn't exactly sure what aspect of Bollywood. And so when I started my PhD, I talked about a lot of things with my advisor and some other professors, and I came across this study that talked about all of the film industries across the world and how they represented, or how poorly they represented, women behind the scenes, on the screen, in speaking roles and things like that. And I found this study, and I was actually like really appalled, because they literally took 10 films and then made their claims from that. And so I wrote this like response to it, and it got published in a book. But basically it was like, 10 films in a country like the Ireland that puts out 25 films a year might be a reasonable number, but India puts out way too many films to pretend to be any kind of indication. But one of the things I did notice when they were, in their study was that across the board in all of the industries that they said, well, there's not enough representation of women behind the scenes. And when women are behind the scenes, there is a small increase in representation on screen. And so I started looking at that and thinking about, like, what does that mean? Is it real, or is that just, a product of this very small selection? I started looking into doing sort of like a film analysis of women-directed films. But then one of my professors, who's now my advisor, said, you can do that anytime when you're a graduate student, do field work, because you never have a better time to do field work. So it changed from just a strictly film analysis project to one where I actually, went to Mumbai, met women directors, talked with them, heard about what their experiences were on set. Because of COVID and the restrictions, even in 2022, I was only able to go to a limited number of sets, but, see how they work and see what differences they might see in their work or not, what they might not see in their work, and look at that as well as this sort of film analysis component.
Right. So that was the beginning, and you must have seen a lot of women directors who are working in India. You must have evaluated their work, the kind of topics and subjects that they move ahead with. So, what has been your experience in that field, Rebecca? As in, what do they generally treat as topics? Is it family? Is it women issues? Is it also the men issues, or is it something very common? So, if you can throw some light on that. And has it evolved over the years, or there's still the number is in reduced amounts, or is it increasing? How do you see that?
Yeah, so first off, I do want to say that historically India has had some fantastic women directors in the more independent
Yeah, Miss Arti. Sorry.
That's okay.
So, yeah, I'll just request everyone to be on mute, please. Please ensure that you're on mute so that we don't disturb the session. Thank you. Yeah, please, Rebecca, go on. Thank you.
So there's a long history of very strong women directors making independent films, or the less commercial films. People like Aparna Sen, like, fantastic woman director, has been making movies for decades. But these aren't what I'm looking at, because one of my arguments is that the popular culture, the widespread, what often people think of as less intellectual, that's what the majority of people see. And so I'm looking at strictly the popular commercial industry. And in that industry, women have been sorely underrepresented. We've had Tanuja Chandra, and we've had Farhan. And now, recently in the last decade, we've had a surge of women directors, which has been fantastic. That was going really well. And one of the things that is sort of like a double-edged sword is, with COVID and the push for Netflix and other streaming services, a lot of these women directors who were finally starting to get seen on the screen are getting pushed into the streaming services. So on the one hand, we have a lot more films that the directors that allow for women directors to do. But on the other hand, they should have the same ability to get on the, in the theaters as well as on the streaming site. And that is harder if you're not, one of the really big directors. And so, definitely a large increase in popular film directors. Having said that, a lot of the women I spoke with said that the studios will often push these women to make family-centered, women-centered films, and a lot of them want to make their own kind of films. Nandita Das, she did a film on Monto, right? And she had to really, really push for that. Definitely, a couple of the other women I spoke with, they said, I want to do the big blockbuster film, but that, I go to the studio and they say, no, why don't you just do this woman's story?
Right.
So it is difficult because they are doing more of the women's stories, but a lot of that is also because that's what they're really getting funded to do. But as I was mentioning before this started, one of the things I have seen is that these women are really great about bringing social issues into their films when the films are not about those social issues, right? It's not Toilet where the story is all about the toilet, which is an important, discussion of let's get proper toilets places, but it's a story about a mother and daughter and a husband that treats her bad, or it's a story of you have the why I can't, all the names flew out of my head. Gully Boy, right? Like, this is a great story about what it means to come out of these difficult, impoverished spaces into bigger spaces, and intermixed in there is a discussion about domestic abuse and what what responsibilities people have in the extended family, and if they just say, oh, you should just put up with the domestic abuse, right, that's not good. And so I think these women are really good and are pushing like several of these social issues in a way that's not, in your face or really just making you like hear the story. And I think that we see more male directors starting to do that as well. And I think that's a great way that these women are influencing these films.
Absolutely. I think very interestingly you have put, Rebecca, that these women directors are trying to give a different picture of the society as to what is happening on the mainstream cinema, because otherwise we are soaked with the commercial blockbuster movies and we hardly get time to notice all the social issues and the evils that are prevalent in the society. And so I think that makes a lot of sense to watch these movies. But how do you see that when we see their impact in the society? Has it really worked for the upliftment of those especially impacted people? How have you seen when you had discussions with them? Is there any impact of these movies back in the society? And what is your take on that? Do you see some changes that are being incorporated in the society now, getting impressed by the movies?
I mean, I think yes. I think that there are even in the, you know, decade and a half that I've been coming to India, I've seen a shift in how people talk about women, you know, women's place, women working, that marriage is not necessarily the end of a woman's life outside of the home, that that you can work after marriage and even after having kids. We see this with a lot more celebrities now, like a lot of the Bollywood actresses are having kids and then working. And, you know, a while ago that would have been unheard of, and now it's even more common. And I think that we see a lot more women, middle-class women working past after they get married. And changes like this are always slow and fast and inconsistent, right? You can always say, oh, you know, this huge thing changed, and then it felt like nothing changed.
True.
But I do think that ultimately we see a positive change in society towards the way that women are viewed, to the way that the responsibility of men to treat women better is viewed. Now, of course, that's not to say that there aren't large, you know, sections of India that is not true, but it's those small steps that are what actually move us towards that change.
Right, absolutely. I think the way we say that movies are the mirror of the society, so is the movies. They also somehow impact the society to go in the right direction. And you being an
Exactly.
external person, an external observer of how things are happening, we being a part of it, it's at times it is difficult for us to observe the change because we are, you know, in itself a change that is happening for us in the society. So, and as an external person, if you tell us that in the span of these 10, 12 years that you have observed our country in a way that it has moved to the paths of changes, then, you know, you could do it in a better way than how we should do it. Moving ahead, you somewhere talked about popular culture products. If you could tell us a little bit about that, what do you mean by, what can we understand by popular culture products? What is popular culture and what are their products?
So, popular culture products are, this is a relatively new sort of jargon in academia, but it's talking about the commercial things that inundate our everyday life: movies, television, social media, songs, you know, the radio, books, comics, all of the things that ads, right? You see ads everywhere, and they all influence how we think about ourselves, how we think about society. And so these products, if they present life one particular way, then it tends to be perpetuated in that way. But when you start having these products suggest alternatives, we see that suddenly people think, oh, maybe I don't have to do this way. Maybe I can do it differently. And that can be for good and bad. But you know, I think about how when India was historically looking at, okay, we've got to do something about population, they started a campaign that 2 children was enough. And, you know, you would tell a lot of people, oh, a political campaign, that's not going to make any difference. But in fact, it's made a huge difference. Like, it's not that the population was suddenly brought under control all of a sudden, but how people thought about what was an acceptable family number has absolutely changed. And in a positive way. You know, if you have 3 kids, you're not shunned, right? It's not China. uh, but just the concept of, oh, you know, like, you don't need a large family if things are, you know, all good. You don't need to help, you know, with labor and things like that.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for all those insightful sharings that you have done with us. I would now like to open the session for everyone. If you have any questions to ask our expert for the day, Ms. Rebecca Peters, please feel free to ask her those questions. Anything related to Bollywood, anything related to English language, perhaps, if you want to know something from her. Yeah, Shubhashi, would like to say something, please unmute and yes.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am, for the wonderful experience you shared with us. Now, my question is related to movies. To what extent if you compare India and like Bollywood and Hollywood, what is the contribution of women filmmakers? How they're different?
So that's a great question, and it is one I get asked a lot. I would say that we see, contrary to what a lot of people believe, Hollywood has been almost as bad at having women directors as India has been historically. Like, both groups have been keeping women out of that field. And in the recent past, both of them have started gaining more notice, and we have a lot more women directors. I will say that I think Hollywood succumbs to peer pressure a little bit more than Bollywood does in terms of having women directors get like a bigger picture. So, you know, in the past 5 years, we've had women directors that have done, you know, Barbie and like Wonder Woman, you know, like some of the really big movies. And some of those have gone poorly and some have done really well. Whereas I think you don't have that same pressure in Bollywood from like social media to have women specifically direct these films. So I think that's the only reason we see in Hollywood some more women directing some of these bigger flagship movies, because in America right now we've had this big push, whereas in Bollywood there's been an amazing increase in the number of women directors in that field, possibly even a greater percentage increase than in Hollywood. But you don't have the social media, you know, like push for Bollywood to give these like big directorial roles to a woman. But having said that, I mean, I think more Indian women directors are making more like non-blockbuster but mainstream films that are getting out on like Netflix and Amazon, all of these streaming sites. There's just a bunch of women making films in India right now, and we don't have that same thing happening in Hollywood. So in the sort of like in the visual, it looks like Hollywood is doing better, but I would argue that probably Bollywood is doing a little bit better if you're looking actually the numbers of films getting made.
Right. Thank you, Rebecca, for that response. Shubhashish, do you have anything else to ask?
Yes. Is there any way of like encouraging this the new generation? I would like the new generation to work and be more creative. So do you think that there is any chance of the new generation to like create uh, good women directors?
I think a lot of the film schools are really encouraging more women in these roles. I know that at Whispering Woods, they've had women take on more of these sort of assistant director jobs. But it also, because of how film works, you've got to have the support at the at the producer level, and that's where we really need to see more change happening. I interviewed this young woman who was an AD for several years, and eventually, instead of making films, went into advertising because she needed to be able to have a steady income. And so that's where we really need to sort of push, is to have these producers and studios really move, sort of encourage people to move from ADs into actual directors, because there's a lot more women ADs now than there were 10 years ago.
Right. I think you're talking about the ecosystem that has to be built in a way that it helps everyone in a totality, and then they all move together, helping each other.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Totally. You also spoke, Rebecca, about the number of women directors in Hollywood with respect to those in Bollywood. And we see that the number is increasing in India, whereas it's not the same case in Hollywood, as you mentioned about it. So is it also related to the fact that there are a lot of issues, a lot of points that we can actually see in India, and somehow people are more close in the sense that the approach is more closer, and they can feel connected to those kind of issues, and they want to take them up for maybe for public picture to display to others? How do you see that with respect to the kind of society that we live in, and that also propels us in the fact of taking these up as points for creating visions for people and business for people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so part of the issue in Hollywood is that the sexism is more subtle. Like, people will use all kinds of excuses as to why they won't fund a woman, and it will never be because she's a woman. Whereas in India, because it's more common to say things like, oh, well, women are naturally suited for these kinds of roles, and men are more naturally suited for these kinds of roles, because it's more socially acceptable to say. You get more honesty, honestly, in Bollywood, because they'll just say, oh, we're not so sure how suited they'll be for that. And that's easier to address, right? It's easier to say, no, I can do it, like, let me show you do it. Whereas if in Hollywood, where you have all of these excuses that have nothing to do with you being a woman, it's much harder to attack that or address it and say, let me do this, let me show you. And in both film industries, when you sit down to make a film, how much control you have over the final product is limited based on how much your producer allows you to have. If you've got a big investor, they can come in and say, nope, you've got to put this person in here, you've got to change this. And in India, you have the added censorship. Like in America, we don't have a censor board. So you don't have to go through a censor board. You do have to go through a rating system that works a little bit like the censor board, but they can't stop your film being put in theaters. And so, you know, there's plenty of women that say, oh, the movie that finished is not the movie that I started with. And you know, in Hollywood, they'll often use that as an excuse for why women can't continue to get funding. Is they'll say, look at what this, you know, this woman made this film and it did horribly. And they ignore the fact that, you know, a dozen men made terrible movies and they continue to get funded, right? Like, but I feel like I've gotten off track from the question, but yeah, I mean, I think that in many ways the you know, sort of like gender biases that are more overtly spoken in India allows for women to be able to combat that more actively, whereas in Hollywood it's much harder to combat that. In both industries, knowing people helps more than anything else. But even apart from that, you know, you've got to have the backing of, you know, plenty of reliable, usually men, to really get your films made.
Right.
As women.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you. Are there further more questions for our expert? Please feel free to ask questions to our expert. It's a time of exchange.
Yeah, I've sent my question on the chat.
All right. So yeah, there's a question by Miss Adita Saxena. You'd like to read it out for yourself, Adita, or should I read it out for you?
Yeah, 1 minute.
Yeah.
In call messages. Yeah. So my question to you is, ma'am, there are many social issues brought up in Bollywood movies. But as a foreigner, what is the difference that you notice in the movies that are screened abroad and in the issues that we deal in our country? And if the social issues are the same, what is the similarity?
So yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I would say the social issues are often different because the societies are different. I will also say that Bollywood has a much longer history of including social issues in their films compared to Hollywood. When Hollywood started out around the same time that Bollywood did, they both had really strong, you know, anti-capitalism films. A lot of the people in the film industries were really interested in getting those social issues out. And in India, that has continued to various degrees, right? Like, obviously, you go through stages where people just want to see happy films, but throughout the history, social issues have been an important part of even big blockbuster films. In Hollywood, because of particularly America's governmental scared, they were scared of communism, especially Russian communism. They pretty much killed social issue discussions in Hollywood films for several decades. And now your standard film may have a little statement in it, but generally speaking, if it's a social issue film, it's a social issue film. Their regular films almost never have really relevant discussions. If they do, they're usually about corruption of government or problems with, like, you know, capitalism or, you know, consumerism, this idea of like buy. They're much less commonly about, you know, the problems of like domestic violence or the problems of like drugs or alcohol, or, you know, even just like the problems of poverty in America. Unless that film is specifically about it, you very rarely get to see it. Whereas in Bollywood, almost all of the films will have at least some discussion of some kind of a social ill. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I really loved Bollywood when I first started watching it, because you have this great, fantastic, you know, over the top musical number, but you don't lose any heart from that, right? Like you get this great discussion, even if it's a, you know, a subplot, it's still an important part of the film. And I do like that Bollywood or you know, Indian films in general, like they will often look at all kinds of different social problems. You know, you see from, you know, women and poverty to you know, harassment at work to you know, sanitation to corruption to you know, and it's usually done in a way that is not to say India is bad because of X, but look at what we need to make better. And I think that's also a nice aspect of Bollywood. But yeah, in Hollywood, you really, if you get a film that includes a social ill, it's almost always about that social ill, which, you know, is kind of sad.
True. I think you very beautifully put it out, Rebecca, the way you said that if we have to treat an issue, you have to bring it out. And I think it can be beautifully brought out through movies and people get to know about it and they start to discuss it. And furthermore, there is some kind of reformation, some change that happens to that problem. And finally, we get rid of it or, you know, things change for a better version. Are there further more questions for our expert? All right, Jayaditya, would like to say something?
Hi, good morning, everyone. And
Good
my
morning.
question is to her is like, have she ever watched the films of Meera Nair, director
Yes,
Meera Nair?
I do love her, and she's the big. I'm gonna have to have a note in my dissertation about her because I don't include her in most of my discussion because other than her first like Monsoon Wedding and Bombay, Salon Bombay, there it is. I was like, what is it? Other than those two, all of her funding has been from a foreign source, or the majority of her funding has been from a foreign source. And since I'm looking specifically at like Indian directors working in India, I'm not including her in my current work. Having said that, she is so important. Absolutely, I'm going to be, you know, including her work in further studies because she's such a fantastic director. And I would say that most non-Indians, if you ask for an Indian director, she's the one they're going to know. So yeah, I love her work.
Thank you. Yeah, Jayaditya, your voice is not very clear.
Hello, is it clear
Jayaditya, your
now?
voice is not very clear to. Yeah, it is. It's better now. Please carry on.
Is it clear now?
Yes, it
Hello.
is. Please carry on.
Yeah,
Yes, we can hear
so
you.
I got the opportunity to see her in person at her one of the sessions at Jaipur Literature Festival. So she told that okay, she got this offer for Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire in 2003. But her daughter said that, okay, mom, anybody can make Harry Potter, but only you can make the namesake. So she took up that movie and created
Oh,
that wonderful, amazing movie with Irfan, the actor Irfan Khan. Now his name is Irfan. So yeah, and then she also
yeah,
went
I
on
love
moving,
Irfan.
going and yeah, that making the movie Queen of Cutway. And I think
Right.
if nobody has, like, if anybody haven't watched that film, you should watch that film, even though I haven't. It's about the chess
I
prodigy
have
in
seen it.
Africa. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's a wonderful
yeah.
film. So yeah, it's her finesse, we can say that she's a master in her art. And yeah, so we are proud to have her as a women director from India. And yeah, she has given multiple excellent films throughout her career.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, it's true. She is quite an amazing director, and I'm uh, a little jealous you get to meet her or get to see her speak.
Right. Thank you, Jayaditya, for that wonderful input. Thank you, Rebecca, for those wonderful answers as well. We'd like to move ahead quickly with our last part of the session, wherein we would like to ask some expressions in English to our dear learners. Let's see if they can help us with their meanings. So I would share my screen, and we would ask them as to what they understand by these expressions in English, and then we will verify them with our expert. All right. So if my screen is visible to you, we will go ahead with the first one. All right, blessing in disguise. So anyone who knows can raise their hands, and I'll ask them. Yeah, Shubhashish.
His blessing in disguise means, something like it doesn't appear to be good, but actually the result of the impact of that action or thing is good or beneficial.
Yeah, we'll check with our
I
expert.
don't know like how far I managed to
Yeah,
explain.
yeah,
Yes, yes,
Rebecca.
that is correct. Yeah, something that doesn't at first appear to be a good thing that becomes quite good.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we'll move with the next
I
one.
just I'm just interfering once.
Yeah.
See, recently I resigned resigned from my job, and that
Mhm.
is in fact seems that appears to be a blessing in disguise for me. Resigning for from my job.
We
Ah,
wish you all the very very best, and we definitely feel that it's a blessing in disguise for you, the kind of enthusiasm and motivation that you have for yourself. Great. We'll move ahead with the next one. A dime a dozen. Anyone for that?
Something which is
A
not
dime. Yeah.
hello.
Yeah. Yeah. Please,
Something which is
Jaditya,
not
tell us.
very costly. It's cheap in price, I guess.
Yeah, we'll check with our expert. Rebecca would like to throw
uh,
some light on that.
yeah, that it's cheap and easily gotten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Perfect. Thank you. The next one, I think it's an easy one. A piece of cake. It's indeed a piece of cake. Anyone for that? Yeah, Shubhashish.
Something that's very easy.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that's very easy to do. Totally. Great. Moving ahead with the next one. All ears.
I'm all ears.
I'm all ears. Yeah, Shubhashish.
Yeah, to pay full attention.
Exactly. Absolutely. Right. That's correct. Listening carefully to be absolutely attentive. All right. An arm and a leg. An arm and a leg.
Maybe it is like not a correct pair, like not in
Okay.
sync.
Okay. Oh, that's an
Nice
interesting
guess.
observation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's usually having to do with cost,
Yeah.
with
It has.
expense.
Yeah. It has to do with the cost of something. Any guesses? We'll
Yeah.
spill the
So
beans.
Maybe cost
uh,
dearly.
Yeah, exactly. So
right,
something very
exactly.
expensive. Yeah, absolutely. But that
Right.
was a great observation, Jaditya. Something that's not fitting well. So two things
Right.
quite contrary.
Yeah.
But the right answer is very expensive. And in
Yeah.
the end, yeah.
Yeah, it costs an arm and a leg, and I've no idea where the expression comes from, but it is very common.
Right. Yeah. And in the end, we have
They
one
have
last one,
to
which is
pay it with their like arm and a leg, like by body.
yeah,
Like maybe in
totally.
olden
I
Right.
think so.
times.
Yeah, totally. I think they'll have to, sell off their body parts in the end to sort of get those things. So they're too expensive. You can imagine that kind of origin for that. And at the end, we have.
Sell our kidneys.
Sorry, Shubhashish, you saying
It's not
something?
like sell for legs. It's not sell for legs, but sell for kidneys.
All right. I hope it never happens to anyone. And we'll move with the last one at the drop of a hat. Anyone for that? At the drop of a hat.
It's like very quick, like in a quick flash of an eye.
Absolutely, without any hesitation or
Yeah.
delay. Totally great. That's true. All right. So with that, we have come to the end of our session for the day. We are really thankful to you, Rebecca, for being such a great speaker for the day. And you spoke so interestingly about the presence of women directors in India and Bollywood, and also about the English language and Hindi language, your own journey. It was a great learning experience for all of us. Thank you so much for being there.
I'm just
Thank you so much for having me.
just one thing. Hello.
Yeah, Shubhashish, please tell us.
Yeah, just it's something like Mr. Chanchal Chakravarti.
Yeah.
I think he's from Calcutta. So,
Uh-huh.
if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Chanchal Chakravarti, do you teach in Dum Dum in a school near airport?
We'll take it offline, Shubhashish. We'll take it offline.
Yeah,
We'll take that. Don't worry. We'll put you in touch. You get in touch with us, right? Thank you.
yeah. Please do so,
Yes,
because as
yes.
far as I can guess, he's a very old acquaintance,
Yeah,
and I've lost contact with him.
great.
So since he's there, so if you can
You write
connect
to
me
me.
to
You
Mr.
write to me.
Chakravarti.
You write to me. I'll get in touch with. I'll put you in touch with Mr. Chanchal Chakravarti. Not a problem.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Indeed, it's a great platform to meet people across and to actually restore your old links as well. So with that, we have come to the end. And just to let everyone know, it is 2:30 a.m. at Rebecca Ma'am's place. So thank you so much for taking time at such an odd hour as well. And thank you to all
Yeah.
our dear participants. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. See you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone.